Even seasoned fans, cast members, and producers were left stunned, unable to completely comprehend how what had begun as a typical day in Atlanta's thriving reality TV universe suddenly erupted into a situation so stunning that things immediately got out of hand. The morning started with the typical mix of glitzy social media posts, rumors from behind the scenes, and actors acting like everything was serene. However, beneath that polished exterior, tension crackled with a level of intensity that was still unknown. It wasn't until one brief, direct, and at about the same moment that the mood changed from ordinary drama to a full-blown emotional explosion that no one could control. Two phones flashed images that were impossible to ignore. In a few minutes, private group conversations became lively. The cast realized they were no longer dealing with rumors or conjecture as notifications continued to come in. They were facing a conflict so intense, intimate, and deeply ingrained that it threatened to destroy years of precarious harmony. Even crew members accustomed to dealing with meltdowns were taken aback by how the fight quickly became more intense, as though someone had suddenly released everything by ripping off the top of a pressure cooker, and two individuals who had been avoiding each other stood in the middle of the mayhem. This moment for far too long, now compelled to confront a secret that would not go away, a secret that endangered relationships, reputations, the plot of the entire season in a single, powerful swoop. For many years, the connections in this complex web of spouses functioned as a careful balancing act in which each individual carried even when they pretended to move on. There were silent regrets, unresolved emotional wounds, and concealed frustrations. Resilience and longevity were the cornerstones of Kirk and Rashida's brand. Beneath their polished exterior, however, was a history of difficult errors, awkward reconciliations, and the kind of persistent misgivings that can subtly strangle a marriage from the inside out. Erica, on the other hand, continued to be a constant presence in their narrative, symbolizing a chapter Kirk attempted to shut but was never fully successful in burying, particularly because their past periodically reappeared in ways neither party had complete control. Mendeecees and Yandi, a couple whose devotion to one another had always been their greatest weakness, were on the other side of the narrative. However, in private, the two struggled with unsolved problems, fluctuating trust, and a stressful atmosphere that made every minor argument seem much more significant than it actually was. The emotional burden that each of the four people carried created a delicate environment in which one poor decision, one misconstrued communication, or one reoccurring error might suddenly bring everything to an abrupt stop. All of these suppressed emotions eventually coalesced into a simmering undercurrent, creating a volatile emotional landscape that was just ready to explode with the correct spark. And when that spark eventually materialized, caused by an unexpected message, it did more than simply rekindle old wounds. It demonstrated how intricately linked these interactions were, and how in the days preceding the eruption, a great deal of suffering had been sitting in silence, waiting to burst into the public eye. Kirk had been remarkably silent and had a rigid, even Rashida sensed the distracted energy, but she was unable to fully understand it, unaware that he had already started to piece together conversational fragments, subtle behavioral changes, and casual remarks that didn't sit well in agreement with him. Despite his best efforts to remain calm, an uneasy mix of intuition, unresolved memories, and guilt drove him into a secret investigation he thought would disprove his worries rather than validate them. Rather than face anyone head-on, he withdrew inward, reliving past transgressions. He wished he could undo and discreetly examining each exchange related to the current tension swirling around Erica and Mendeecees. He examined communications, checked time stops, and even went back to discussions he had previously attempted to forget, in search of certainty, but finding just additional queries. His discomfort increased with every new fact, reminding him of how brittle relationships can become when several secrets accumulate between those who are expected to have faith in one another. Despite making an effort to move cautiously, he finds himself torn between wanting to defend his own family and realizing how seriously this scenario threatens to spill out of his control. And as he continued his silent probe, it became evident that whatever was going on wasn't only a miscommunication or an instance of emotional perplexity. It was a part of a series of events that were strong enough to force everyone, especially him, into a conflict for which none of them were ready. Quiet murmurs flowing through were the beginning of it all. With each night that went by, Erica's bar whispers, which were never supposed to leave the dark corners of the lounge, grew louder. The same familiar individual was spotted by regulars sneaking in after hours, lingering long enough to raise suspicions, yet departing fast enough to avoid being noticed. Workers who typically minded as they observed a pattern developing in front of them. Their own company couldn't resist exchanging glances. The same tense body language, the same covert chats, and the same hurried exits that suggested something there was a deeper brewing. Everyone initially dismissed it as coincidence, or even innocuous socializing, until one evening when a family acquaintance stopped in the middle of a drink, squinted, and realized they had witnessed a similar situation in the past, prior to a scandal that broke out years ago. In an instant, the atmosphere changed. Individuals who had previously dismissed the sighting began to lean closer, pay more attention, and listen more intently. Before long, your company's unwritten rule of mind collapsed, apart, to be replaced by an increasing sense of uneasy curiosity. Someone was watching every time the door opened and a shadow came close to the back booths. And the more people observed, the more difficult it was to ignore the fact that something much more intricate and hazardous was taking place. The rumors had become more than just whispers. They were the first warning signs that a tale was about to blow up. It was more than conjecture by the time the tension from Erica's bar got to Frost Bistro. A storm was on its way to shatter, and as the two eventually stood face to face, everyone in the room felt the pressure change. The eatery is typically bustling on weekends. Excitement abruptly descended into a tense silence as patrons leaned in without even realizing it, and employees exchanged wary looks. Kirk entered with a serious demeanor that immediately altered the place's tone. His shoulders were stiff, his visage was caught between bewilderment and rage, and each step was a hint that he was tired of accepting ambiguous explanations and half-truths. Erica met him with a composed appearance that only heightened the situation because she was taken aback but refused to show it. At first, their voices were low and almost too controlled, as though they were both attempting urgently to prevent a public outburst of the problem. However, the crackling voltage of unresolved allegations was present in every phrase. The air became thicker with tension, and even the clinking of plates in the rear seemed to be intensified. The tone abruptly changed when the discussion turned from broad inquiries to specific accusations. Instantly, sharp words flew like sparks, emotions that had obviously been building for far longer than either party wanted to acknowledge, as well as defensive tones, while patrons pretended not to pay attention. Every ear in the establishment was paying attention, anticipating the next statement, the next disclosure, the next moment of calm. Although there was no yelling match, the tension was greater than any disagreement could have been, revealing the real-time fracture lines. Everyone in Frost Bistro saw this wasn't a misunderstanding after that one heated exchange. It was the start of something enormous, disorganized, and no longer concealed. What had been a private suspicion turned into indisputable proof within hours of the altercation when screenshots, direct messages, and time-stamped receipts appeared, each one more startling than the last. A few leaked photos were the first, and they gently, almost gingerly, spread within a tiny circle. However, as more parts were added, the jigsaw came together in a form that was completely The screenshots weren't ambiguous or easily disregarded. They displayed definite usernames, unambiguous chats, and messages that demonstrated a much deeper link than anyone had anticipated. Then came the excruciatingly precise timestamps that matched the same nights that folks had seen. The same well-known visage at Erica's pub, the same nights that Kirk had said he was somewhere else, and the same times when tension had escalated inexplicably. Each receipt painted a picture of late-night meetings, conflicting schedules, and communication styles. That was beyond explanation. Shock soon gave way to skepticism as the evidence spread, and when more people became aware of how long this had been going on, bewilderment gave way to indignation. Been constructing in the dark. Those who suspected the truth now had the evidence they had been waiting for. And friends who had previously defended the situation fell silent. The digital trail was too thorough, too reliable, and too damning to ignore texts that perfectly matched sightings, receipts that supported the rumors, and screenshots that revealed talks intended to remain secret forever. The story had already changed from rumor to revelation by the time everything became public. Moreover, there was no turning back. The truth wasn't the only thing the receipts showed. They broke it open so that everyone could see it, widely visible to all. The room seemed to stop when Erica finally spoke, as though every moving component within the Frost Bistro came to a grinding stop. Lear's quiet suspicions had been growing tense up to that time. Sharp looks and incomplete statements are little in comparison to the impact of a she was going to drop a line. Kirk waited, prepared for either denial or an explanation, but Erica didn't make a decision. Rather, she gave a single, sharp sentence that cut like a knife across the air. It was a statement that implied she knew much more than she had ever acknowledged. Additionally, Kirk's interpretation of what happened wasn't the complete picture. The energy in the room exploded as soon as she said those words. Mid-bite, customers froze. Employees gazed in incredulity, and even the background music seemed to stop playing. Kirk was taken aback by the weight of her statement, which replaced his confidence with a chilly feeling, shock that reflected everyone's response around them. Erica didn't use an apologetic or defensive tone. It was almost resigned, as though she had long since come to terms with the consequences. Kirk experienced an emotional collapse as a result of that confidence, his face changing from rage to he struggled to comprehend what she had just disclosed, going from bewilderment to disbelief. The tension in the room was palpable, murmurs emerging from nooks and crannies, bones slipping stealthily out of pockets, and each witness acknowledging in silence that they had just witnessed the turning point. The tap wasn't lighted by the yelling or the altercation. Was Erica's one indisputable statement? Cracks was revealed in a sentence that Kirk refused to acknowledge, pushing the whole thing into a risky new area. While the conflict unfolded in real time, most people were unaware that behind the scenes, producers were already directing the story and planning how each detail would be handled. Could have the biggest influence on screen. At a crossroads where honesty seemed like a sin and silence felt like guilt, Kirk was caught between clearing his name and defending his family. Configuration. Producers pushed for admission and transparency, for openness, but more significantly, they advocated for a plot that would captivate viewers with each new episode. Kirk was aware that if he didn't take charge, someone else would fabricate an angle that would make him appear even worse, leak specific clips, or distort the story. His hand was pressed by that pressure as well as the growing body of evidence surrounding him. Going public wasn't an attempt to win people over, was concerning regaining control before things got out of hand. He wanted the world to hear his story straight from him, uncut into sound bites or altered for drama. Ultimately, he didn't advance because of his ego. It was survival in a world where the quickest way to perish is through silence. When a voice memo abruptly appeared, things changed once more just when it seems that the situation could not get much worse. An unforeseen recording that added petrol to a fire that was already on fire. A private chat full of stress, a pleas, and incomplete truths was preserved in the note. And once, when Kirk heard it, something inside of him broke. His stance tensed, his tone shifted, and the atmosphere became tense and erratic. The voice memo was more than proof, it provoked emotions, the kind that causes reasoning to vanish and tempers to boil. Erica attempted to clarify, but it only made the situation worse as Kirk moved in closer, his annoyance erupting in real time. Employees traded terrified glances, not knowing whether to step in or stay out of the way as the dispute became more heated and intimate, despite both attempting to be quiet. The back and forth grew louder. Command. And when Erica reached out to try to stop Kirk's advance, it didn't take long for feelings to overcome self-control. The motion collided with his own irritated gesture, which led to an abrupt bodily shove that caused all onlookers to gasp. It wasn't intentional hostility, it was the type of unintentional escalation that occurs when two individuals are pushed well beyond their emotional boundaries. But the effect was evident, as the thrust reverberated throughout the space. The energy from intense conflict to a major emergency. In a matter of seconds, the entire room became a chaotic whirl of phones, people whispering, recording, and responding. Astonishment and incredulity. When Kirk realized what had just transpired, he froze. Erica's eyes became wide with the agonizing realization that the PR crisis had gone too far for either of them to turn back. The story was irrevocably altered in that one explosive moment, laying the groundwork for consequences for which no justification or apology would be capable of containing. The city seemed to wake up holding its breath, waiting for the new chapter to begin, and the following morning felt heavier than anyone could have predicted. Unfold. Frost. Bistro still had a lot of energy from the previous evening, employees reliving every detail, clients going back to the exact moment the producers were frantically trying to figure out how to keep the story under control before it got out of hand. The true surprise, though, was when Yandi unexpectedly entered. Her presence cut like a dagger through the tension right away. She wasn't screaming. She was not in tears. She was calm, focused, and moving with the kind of restrained intensity that causes everyone in the room to back off. The instant she locked, the crash occurred. Eyeballs with Kirk, who appeared to have been sleep-deprived for days. His entire stance was a reflection of his weariness and shame. Erica is standing over to the side, froze as Yandi's expression changed from bewilderment to awareness to a serene, icy unbelief. As Yandi sought answers, the tension in the room increased. With theatrics, but with incisive questioning that prevented Kirk from hiding behind fabrications or producer-directed justifications. There was never a crack in her voice. Rather, it conveyed a degree of disappointment that was more potent than any disagreement. People peered at each other from the corners, being aware that this conflict was the moment when the fallout became genuine. Intimate and uncontrollable was what everyone had been waiting for. As the discussion progressed, it became evident that nothing about this circumstance could be discreetly fixed. The drama wasn't only intensified by Yandi's presence, it signaled the transition from conjecture to irrevocable outcomes. Social media erupted into an uncontrollable frenzy. Within minutes of the first leaked video becoming viral, trending lists were dominated by long threads questioning who was lying, who was manipulating, and who was ultimately being exposed emerged as fan pages analyzed every frame. People immediately took sides, overflowing timelines with hypotheses, opinions, and fury that got louder by the hour. Influencers swooped in to take advantage of the situation. Response channels revealed breakdowns, and even previous cast members reappeared to leave mysterious remarks. The public wasn't merely observing. They were actively contributing to the mayhem with modifications, reposts, and voiceovers, until the scandal as a whole seemed bigger than the individuals involved. The situation had already escalated by the time producers called for an urgent meeting, where it seemed almost impossible to control harm. Members of the cast were dragged into a blinds-drawn conference room, phones gathered at the entrance, and to stop leaks, security is positioned outdoors. As the lead producer set a phone on the table, cleared her throat, and hit play on the entire audio tape, everyone sat intense, quiet, had been making ripples in the background. In an instant, the room stiffened. The memo's voices, pauses, and emotional cracks all played out in terrible clarity, revealing background that they had all never heard before. It was more than a recording. It was a chronology, an admission, and an unvarnished dissection of everything that resulted in the conflict. Kirk shifted uneasily. Erica gazed at her hands, while Yandi listened with a look so nobody dared look at her because she was so inscrutable. The producers exchanged glances that were more expressive than words, acknowledging not only the explosive potential this audio had for the show but also the permanent harm that was verified. The stillness that followed the memo's conclusion was oppressive. There are no justifications or justifications, just the weight of reality hanging in the space between each person. By describing the legal risks, the narrative ramifications, and the urgent actions required to handle the fallout, the producers eventually diffused the tension. However, one thing became brutally apparent even as they were speaking. The audio did more than merely make the plot more difficult. It was entirely rewritten. It totally revised it. All eyes turned to Yandi, who had not moved since the audio started. As the last seconds of the recording faded into quiet, there was a gravity to the quiet that pervaded the whole space. Even the producers, who are typically unfazed by mayhem, didn't appear to know what she would do next. She gradually exhaled, not in rage, but with a profound, worn-out awareness that what she needed to know had at last been brutally shown to her. There was no